Наша сегодняшняя встреча посвящена
Our meeting today is dedicated to what is happening in the world oil market. Much has been said about this, but such a global conceptual view of what is happening is not always visible here. If we look at the oil price quotations from these positions, we should recall, first of all, the rigid formula of Vasily Kluchevsky, who said, "The pattern of historical phenomena is inversely proportional to their spirituality." And today I will try to show that in the scenarios of what is happening with oil, there is one and the same played record. That is, a process goes on, some time passes, and then the process is repeated again. You just need to look closely at the past. That is, today, in order to understand the future of the oil market, you need to carefully look at the past. Today I wanted to show that oil does not fall at all, as we are being convinced. Oil is lowered. And I would like to refer to even one of the current publications, which is entitled, "Saudi Arabia has sharply reduced prices for the European market." Curiously, Saudi Arabia is sharply increasing its discounts on February shipments for Northwest Europe and Mediterranean customers. That is, we are talking about discounts, and not just some natural market processes. Sometimes you can hear the opinions of representatives of our Ministry of Economic Development that there are no interested parties in reducing oil prices below a certain critical level, which Ulyukayev once estimated in the range of $60 to $80. In reality, the interested parties are much more than anyone could have imagined. But firstly, the most interested party is the global predictor, which today really opposes at the level of conception, since there is a direct clash between the biblical conception and the conception of social safety. The conception of social safety is carried today primarily by the Russian civilization and Russia as its central link. Therefore, the global predictor benefits from hitting the countries that trade in crude oil. Who benefits from a drop in oil apart from such global political scenarios? Without a doubt, this is beneficial to those countries that do not trade in crude oil. You know that in the USA, for more than 40 years, there has been legislation, which is often revised by politicians, prohibiting the export of crude oil from the country by law. The fall in oil prices is beneficial, or more precisely, the fall in oil prices is of absolutely no consequence for those countries that have vertical integrated holdings of oil refining and use. Because if you have a large holding that extracts oil, refines it, and sells products of deep processing, then for you, one of the blocks of the holding becomes, as it were, not very profitable, but the second becomes exactly the same amount more profitable, since it receives raw materials for much cheaper than previously. Therefore, even if the price of oil is strictly equal to zero, then for such companies, it is absolutely not a factor influencing their profits, their development. And today, even in Russia, I have not yet noticed that gasoline has fallen in price by even 3 kopecks. For example, I know that in Kyrgyzstan, since the beginning of 2016, gasoline prices have increased twice. But in the end, countries that have high-tech complexes producing oil products, be it Japan or Germany, undoubtedly benefit from the drop in oil prices. These are countries that are of course interested in obtaining cheap raw materials. And this lowering of prices is being realized through the efforts of a long coordinated and close-knit team, which consists primarily of the United States, Saudi Arabia, Great Britain, and Iran. After all, Iran seems to play a double role. On the one hand, it is a country that is, as it were, anti-American. But on the other hand, it is largely sponsored by Great Britain, and is often used as a piano in the bushes. As soon as oil prices, as we see, have already dropped to $30, this grand piano in the bushes, in the form of Iran, is also brought to the stage. Because just at this time, sanctions against Iran are being lifted, and it will be possible to further explain the further drop in oil prices. In reality, there are no losers in this game. Not the US, not Saudi Arabia, not the UK. Nobody loses. This was the case during the collapse of the USSR when this operation was carried out. This is for those who believe in a free market. Oil prices in Saudi Arabia have plummeted. But the fact is that these oil companies belong, for example, to the Bush family and many other influential people in the United States. Therefore, they will never make losses. And all these price reductions, the discounts for which Saudi Arabia does, are more than compensated by bank loans and financial injections. As a rule, financial support is provided for exactly this sum, for the difference in price. And then these loans become non-repayable. And of course, in 10 to 15 years, the dollar printing press does not even have time to overheat. It is not at all difficult for the USA to compensate with paper for the nice downward game that Saudi Arabia is implementing. And of course, it should be borne in mind that today the USA is entering the stage of presidential elections. And in the USA, there are no political parties. There are simply lobbyists for raw materials producers. These are the Republicans. And lobbyists for processors. These are the Democrats. Therefore, the fact that the Democrats are in power has a certain indirect aggravation of the situation, because they are also less interested in the raw materials business than the Republicans are. And so, let's try to look at the likely scenarios for the development of events for oil, as they are planned by the global predictor. For this we turn, as I said, not to the future, but to the past. Let's look in this slide what happened between 1973 and 1981. The nominal oil price for this period in total increased 12 times, from $3.22 to almost $39 per barrel. Why is this rally to increase oil prices arranged? This rally for an increase in the price of oil, in our time it has followed exactly the same patterns, is arranged so that the political regime against which sabotage is being prepared could allow itself to relax under the influence of propaganda from the outside, under the influence of the internal forces of the fifth column, which, hiding behind the statement that in general everything is not so bad in the country, it continues the rigid course of suppressing the real sector and creates prerequisites for subsequent problems and collapses after this artificial support is removed. Let's look at the next slide. This slide shows a picture that reflects a completely different trend. As a result, the most significant drop in price quotations in history occurred at this particular time. In nominal terms, from 1981 to 1986, oil prices fell 3.6 times. In terms of inflation, they in fact have returned exactly to the level from which they began to increase in 1973. The oil cycle has come to an end. Therefore, there are fears that today we follow exactly the same scheme. In the previous scheme, we remember that this was preparation for the collapse of the Soviet Union. That is, factually speaking, all we got was a slide of rise and fall, but we did not get real long-term changes, because in 1973 and 1986 we had reached the same point. And now let's look at a picture that would connect this known past and some possible future. On this slide, we see two curves, the real and the nominal oil price, starting just from 1972. Here this slide is perfectly visible, from 1972 to 1986. Then comes the period of real oil prices until about 2001. There are all sorts of fluctuations connected, in particular with the tragedy of our nuclear submarine Kursk. Such a relatively sharp increase in oil at this time is a kind of political agreement on compensation for the colossal damage inflicted on our country when the nuclear submarine Kursk was sunk by an American nuclear submarine. She was sunk by mistake. It is absolutely correct that such a disclosure was not given to this fact, but such a spike, which was in the region of 2000, was absolutely connected with this. And then we observe a picture that goes in a different geometry, but its meaning is absolutely the same as in the period from 1973 to 1981. Today we are seeing a sharp decline. In 1986, prices were significantly lower than even the current ones, and over the next 15 years, they fluctuated very insignificantly. And if we talk about the scenario for the future, then it first of all suggests itself in the form of a continuation of the period that we see on this chart from about 1986 to 1999. The duration of this period may vary, but this was a period when a rather serious process was underway in the field of real production. And it is, of course, planned at the level of the global predictor, in the mode of a played record. The only difference is that in contrast to the previous stage, in 2000, the conception of social safety was actually promulgated, and the informational state of society today is fundamentally different. Within the framework of the conception of social safety, global transformations of those scenarios that are laid down by the global predictor are possible. In the Russian language, there is such a concept, the effect of the monkey's paw, when beating them with their own weapon. Maybe this is what happens. Therefore, in reality, the processes are of course very complex. When we talk today of the fact that the dependence of the ruble on the dollar has decreased, this is a very naive delusion, because it has decreased when we count as a percentage. When oil costs $80, then if it falls by half, we lose $40 per barrel. And if it falls by half from $30, then we will only lose $15. Therefore, we are talking about the difference in absolute values. And when we count the percentages, they are absolutely mathematically unacceptable. But in general, concluding our meeting today, I would like to express the hope that our president has a scenario that provides for the transition from the petrodollar to the oil ruble. And in fact, this will mean a transition to an energy currency, because today it is Russia that has all the necessary scientific methodological developments in this regard. And it's no coincidence that even before the new year, we sent both to the presidential administration and to the Ministry of Economy and Economic Development a monograph entitled The Economics of Investment Development. This monograph describes in detail everything that Russia should undertake in response to the next oil slide, upon which the Russian people have once again decided to ride. Let us hope that this time this sliding will not take place and a fundamentally different scenario will come to pass.
Пройдет принципиально иной сценарий.